Alright, welcome back. This is Neil from iPaintGirls.com. You can visit the website for more free tutorials. I went ahead and just finished up some of the hair on the side. It wasn't left much to do from the last video, and I decided to go ahead and do a little face for her so we have something to look at when we're inking. I didn't actually intend for it to look much like Jessica Alba, but it kind of look like her a little bit. I kind of remember what her lips look like when she's not smiling anyway, and so anyway, that kind of came out, I think. So let's go ahead and ink then. I'm going to be using Adobe Illustrator to ink. Now what I do when I want to ink is I have this layer here I want to ink from, and so I just go ahead and select all and go to Edit, Copy, and then I open up Illustrator, and then I just paste it into Illustrator. So I'm going to go and open up Illustrator really quick. Right, now once I have Illustrator open, I go to Web Document, and I usually use something like this, 800 by 800 pixels. It really doesn't matter because when you open up that AI in Photoshop, you can open up at any size, and but anyway, this is just usually how I keep my proportions. Then I paste in here. Then I go to the transparency. I turn down the transparency of what I just pasted in here, about like so. Then I go to layers. I lock that layer, make a new layer to draw on top of. I'm going to double click on the paintbrush, fidelity 1, smoothness 1. Fill new brush strokes. You can have it checked, really doesn't matter in the newer Illustrator because I can just leave this transparent. But if you have an Illustrator that doesn't work with, then just uncheck that. Make sure you uncheck keep selected though. That's something you definitely want unchecked when you're drawing. All this here looks pretty good. Click OK. On paintbrushes over here, click on the icon. I'm going to double click on the small brush here. Make it round, fixed. So fixed, and then diameter, pin pressure. So I'm going to make sure that 2 is, I usually work with 2 or 1, or I might do 3. It just depends on the size of what I imported. Since this is pretty small, I work at 2 and 1. So I might make one brush at 2 and one brush at 1, and that way I can switch between those to get different variations. So let's go ahead and make this all the same as we just did over there, except over here I'm going to type in a 1. Click OK, double click it again, make sure variation wasn't on, so there we go. Right, so also on my Webcam settings I have this set to standard. I'll go ahead and open that up really quick to show you what I'm talking about. All this is important, when inking with Illustrator, is I have my grip pen 2 here, Cintiq, and under Illustrator, notice it's quite firm. So you want it, more towards the firmness over here. You might want it even a little bit more firm than this. It's just try to play around with something you like. And anyway, you can also use like Painter or something to ink with, but I like this. So let's get started. One more final thing before we get started is make sure that after you have your brush set over here, the background is set to transparent. Just click transparent to make sure it's transparent, and the foreground it will be black. Okay, so then I zoom way in, that way I can really see what I'm doing here. Because I already have all the work is already done for me. I just need to go in and start, doing my lines. So what I do here is I'm going to start out with my 2 brush. And let's say I wanted this line here, right? So I'll start with this line, kind of pushing light and then pushing harder as I come over this way. That way I get like a tapered end. And doing that kind of stroke with any other program is really difficult unless that program has this capability of easily allowing you to get tapered ends. And sometimes you have to, this is what is the downfall, is when you meet lines together sometimes it's kind of difficult. You have to be really careful with how you meet lines together. Now notice I want let's say this line here to be really thin, so I'm going to put really lightly like so. But I want this line here to be much thicker, so I'm going to push harder. And so usually with the, I can get everything I need with just that one brush. But watch, if I do a little bit lighter with this brush, sometimes it's pretty much the same thing. And I push really hard, I get, the hard doesn't get quite as hard. So I might go in with this brush to do some of these really thin lines, because I want one side of the lines to be thin and one side of the lines to be thick. And then I go back to this brush here, and now when I go with this thicker line like so, I get that variation. But you can usually get enough variation with just using the 2 brush, or whatever, whatever brush you're using. Just depends on the overall size that you're working with. And you want to make sure that when you do these kinds of lines in Illustrator, you do it as 2 separate lines. Otherwise, Illustrator messes up how it looks. So something like so. I'm going to do this outline line here. Notice each time I do a shape, I do it one. You can't, like, because if you go like this, it sometimes it doesn't work right and it doesn't look how you want it to. So you want to do short lines on top of each other, and that usually gives you more control over the overall. Oops, that line is not going to be like that, like that. So as you can see, you can get really nice, smooth, cool lines with Illustrator. And this is something you can't get, that I've noticed, with other software unless it's a vector-based software like Flash or Program Sci. I think uses both pixel and vector. So here I'm just thinking about the different lines and the variations I want. Typically, I'm taking the light's coming from this way, so that's why these lines on that side are thin and the lines on the right are thicker. That is, the parts that are going away from the light are thicker than the parts that are toward the light are thinner. So it just adds a more cool variation that way. I think so anyway, and it's what a lot of comic book artists do when they're inking. Now you can get these kinds of lines with a paintbrush. It takes some practice with your paintbrush, but if you do practice with a paintbrush, you can get some really nice lines like this, these tapered off lines. So I could have used the fill, but I didn't feel like changing the brush, so I want to kind of run another line that kind of goes to both of those. See, that line kind of messed up there. What's cool about this though is you can take your time and notice it smooths out for you. So even if you have a shaky hand, matter of fact, if you have a shaky hand, I recommend using some sort of program like this, a program that allows you, a vector-based program that allows you that has a little bit of change in fidelity of your line. Now what sucks about this program is if you wanted to do a bunch of like cross-hatching, let's say, or you wanted a bunch of thin lines together right here like this. See how it messes it all up? That first line came out kind of straight, but watch when I do another line next to it. See how it curved in like that? I didn't want it to do that. That's not how I drew it. And so that's the only thing that kind of sucks with inking with Illustrator. And so when I want to do cross-hatching, I usually do it in another program. So I'll do all my main lines, with Illustrator, and then I'll come back in with Photoshop or Painter or something for other lines. So that that line's thick because it's on this side, and the lines that are over here, I want to make them thinner, so I'm not going to push as hard. Now when working with the paintbrush, you can do the same thing, and you can actually work quite slow with the paintbrush. You use a paintbrush like a size 3 sable brush with ink, India ink. And what's cool about that is you can actually work quite slow too. So work slow, light, and then go harder and then thinner, so that way you can get these tapered lines. You can also do it with pencil, but it takes more, it's harder with pencil, I think. A brush takes a while to get used to, if you've never used one before, but I think the brush is superior for inking. And so, then for like really thin lines, for straight thin lines, you want to use a nice, pen. Notice some of those lines overlap. That's fine. What I can then do is grab my eraser tool, make sure that the background, the one in the back, is set to transparent, and the one in the front is set to black with your eraser. And then I have the size set quite small, and notice I can just hit that one little line, and actually I don't know what happened there. So that's the only thing about this program, is notice that it changed all that. So if I made a mistake and I wanted to go through that line, it changes all those lines diameter. That's kind of a bummer. So what I can try to do, I don't think this works, but I'll set this to 2. I'm almost out of time, and it's on pressure. Let's see what happens now. Nope, still does that. Let me make that transparent. Nope. Yeah, so I thought you could erase with Illustrator in an easy way, but I guess you can't. But like in programs like Flash and stuff, you can pretty much erase as you would. I think if it still works the way I remember it, you can erase like you would with a pixel-based program. I think maybe Program Sci does that too, allows you to erase vector as if it were pencil. But it's no big deal because I can then just go in and fix it up in Photoshop after I import this back, the line work back in there. Then it becomes pixel based. Then I can go and erase little things that I might have messed up on. Right. So anyway, as you can see, this is all I'm going to be doing is just adding all the lines to this, and then it'll be done. So I'm going to push pause and do that, and then show you the end result. Actually, you know what? I'm going to come back with one more part on inking because I wanted to show a few more things. So come back for the next part. I'll show you some cool things with how you can get better lines too, or more control over your lines.